Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Nadarga Veilazi, and before we begin, I want to remind you about our all-new streaming platform, ILTV Plus, where you'll have access to exclusive interviews, virtual tours, live streams, and more. So if you haven't already signed up today at ILTV.tv or through all the app stores, Roku TV, and Amazon Fire. And now, coming up in today's newscast. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett meets for the first time with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Israel designates 6 Palestinian NGOs as affiliates of terrorist organizations, and the U.S. is demanding answers. And a delegation of 30 Israeli entrepreneurs visits Dubai to promote innovation and business ties. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett wrapped up his first official trip to Russia this weekend to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Sochi on Friday. This was the first official meeting between the two leaders since Bennett took office. Among the main topics on the agenda were discussions on Syria and Iran. And here with more details on the meeting is ILTV reporter Asaf Nissan. Asaf, thanks for joining us. Now, first of all, how was the meeting between the two leaders?
Well, we've seen the meeting as a warm and friendly meeting between both leaders. This is the first official meeting, as you mentioned, that is going on between the new Israeli government and the Russian presidency. Now, seeing as Putin was considered also a close friend to Netanyahu, it was actually nice and surprising to see how well his relationship with Bennett was. In fact, making a personal meeting from 2 hours to 5 hours, and even inviting Bennett into his personal chambers. Something that hasn't happened to a lot of leaders.
So what were some of the major issues that they discussed?
So some of the major issues that were discussed were the relations between Russia and Israel that have been constituted now for 30 years. In addition, of course, the Syrian issue, the aerial security, Iran, the usual stuff pretty much between every world leader, especially now that there's a worry about Iran finally reaching a bomb, and of course the worries about how they're going to deal with Syria, especially since Russia is supporting also the Syrian regime. So there does stand the question of what they should do, pretty much.
So as you mentioned, I mean, it's no secret that Russia has close ties with Iran and the Assad regime in Syria. So this war meeting, will it have any effect on these ties? And how exactly does Israel fit into the Kremlin's Middle East strategy?
As we're seeing in the Middle East strategy, we're seeing a lot of response that happens from Russia. Ever since the days of the Cold War, where the Soviet Union tried to have its foothold in the Middle East, up to today that Russia still keeps close ties with Syria and Iran, of course with Israel and Lebanon. Well, Lebanon, I don't know per se, but I would probably presume that at some level Russia is trying to help there also. Now, seeing which, we are seeing changes. We won't see a lot of changes, in my opinion, between Syria and Russia, since the Russians do still support the Syrian regime. But we will see the return of the policy between Israel and Russia, that Israel can attack in Syria without any Russian response, and of course talking about only when it comes to the Iranian base supposedly being constructed there. Of course, we are seeing proof of that. We've seen attempts in the past by the IDF to bomb in Syria. Until 2018, they didn't have any issue, and of course 2018 started the whole problem of how to deal with Russia. Now that we accidentally hit the Russians, and they, in response, sent Syria new anti-air missiles. So up to that, we're seeing that coming back to the table. So it does mean that the Israeli policy will once again be in effect. So we will see again change towards Israel's response, but in Syria we don't see a lot of change. Of course, the Russians will still be involved.
Okay, Asaf, well, stay with us because we'll be right back with more. Now, while ties may be warming up with Russia, a cool breeze is sweeping in from Washington as Israel and the United States had a very public dispute. On Friday, the Defense and Justice Ministries classified 6 Palestinian NGOs as terrorist organizations. and immediately after received criticism from the UN and from the US, which asked for clarification, saying that Israel had not notified the Biden administration of the move. Israel in turn responded that it had notified the administration and that the NGOs were in fact affiliated with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine terrorist organization. So joining us once again with more information on this is ILTV reporter Asaf Nissan. Okay, Asaf, so what can you tell us about these NGOs?
So these NGOs, known as Adamir, El-Haq, the Sun Center, Defense for Children International, Palestine, the Union of Agricultural Work Committees, and the Union of Palestine's Women Committee. These 6 NGOs have been found to have falsified documents, laundered money, used their meeting to recruit activists into terrorism, and even had some high-level terrorists and former prisoners who were convicted of terrorism attending these meetings in order to recruit. Now, the Popular Front to Liberate Palestine is another organization which, of course, is connected to the PLO, and knowing of which are still trying to raise up the money and pretty much find a way to fund terrorism activities, and even going as far as paying the deceased terrorist families the entire bill that was caused problems with us and the Palestinians in the past.
Right, but I mean, some of these are NGOs that are well known and receive funds from the EU and such. So, I mean, can you maybe give us a little bit more information of how exactly they're affiliated with terrorism?
Said, they are affiliated with the means to recruit, with the means to incite, the means to fund terrorism, of course, and showing all the support they can pretty much by going these falsified documents. Of course, as I said, the recruitment, and we can see also that coming in forth is a lot of strikes from those organizations that the EU is supporting. And our responses, of course, are not in favor. I mean, the fact that the EU is supporting these organizations is a big red flag. And as always, there is the issue of the EU also formally funding UNRWA, which I'm never saying they still do. So even to the fact that we're still seeing funding to different NGOs, and these, of course, do affect the different imagery that we're seeing right now. These organizations are funded by the EU, but at the end of the day, they use their money pretty much to launder towards terrorism.
Now, part of Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and Foreign Minister Yair Lapid's strategy when dealing with the United States is that disagreements, disputes remain behind closed doors. And yet this was a very public rebuking by the United States. I mean, are we finally starting to see grievances being made public? Are we starting to see a strain in ties?
Well, it's too soon to call it a strain in ties after all. This is the first official outbreak between the U.S. and Israel. Now, State Department spokesperson Ned Price did say that they are waiting for further proof from Israel. So that being said, it's not officially, I would say, a strain. It is a challenge. The U.S., of course, is going to continue with strategy that Prime Minister Bennett and Yair Lapid are going with, that it is going to be behind closed doors. And according to defense officials, they didn't notify them behind closed doors that this is coming. So saying that there is a strain, calling this as a challenge is a big idea, because it's also seeing how the U.S. is responding to the fact that Israel did originally give them a heads up that this is going to happen. So that being said, we're still waiting for the results to come in, and of course, to see how Defense Minister Gantz will show any further proof to these claims.
All right, and going along with that, I mean, in your opinion, does Israel intend to back down on this issue? I mean, what's likely to happen now?
Well, I'm not going to see Israel backing down from this issue, because after all, this is one of the issues Israel's been fighting ever since the rise of the BDS. They've been trying to fight any ways of funding terrorism here in Israel. We know pretty much that different movements were outlawed in Israel due to incitement. But it's not pretty much outrageous that they're also going to be outlawed because of funding. So in the end of the day, Israel will not back down, in my opinion. We're seeing this as a strong stance, and Israel will remain behind.